Welcome to Jar of Genius. I'm your host, Russ Perry, and this is a podcast where we dive into the business of creativity. Each episode, I'll explore the minds and stories of innovative leaders and companies who have paved the way and are shaping the future for creative businesses around the world. From groundbreaking business models to extraordinary creative campaigns and the innovations of technology we use and will use ahead, I'm excited to help you not only run a creative business, but thrive in this ever-changing and always challenging landscape. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Jar of Genius. I'm your host, Russ Perry. And today, as always, we are here with individuals doing extremely creative things, innovative things. And this guest, I actually hunted down on Twitter, asked him to be on the call because I was so blown away by the niche space that he's in with productivity systems, and we're going to get into it. But today, I'm very excited for Temirlan Nugmanov. Got your last name, had a few practice rounds in there. Tim, where are you calling in from?
I'm calling in from New York City.
Awesome. So, Tim, we're going to get into it, but let's just say this. You love Notion. Is that a correct statement?
That is a very correct statement. I'm one of the few people in the world who has a Notion tattoo on their arm. I don't know if you know that.
I would assume that there's probably very few people who have done that. So here's the deal. We're going to get into it all, but I think we got to cover some basics because I know what Notion is. You know what Notion is. But let's just start there. You have created an entire business, a movement, your body art around this company and this brand. Why? What is it and why is it so important to you?
If we go in reverse order, or really in any order, I think Notion as a company and as a product had a tremendous impact on my life, right? I think the fact that I built a business around it and a pretty healthy business at that, we've been in business for 4 years and I have a pretty exciting vision. So I think that will have a tremendous impact on my career. That's where that tattoo came from. But of course, all of that excitement is built on a fantastic product created by an incredible team, one that I believe in, and the product that I'm using every day, both for organizing like personal data. For example, like I'm tracking my poker games in there right now, or, like using it professionally, like all of our note taking, all of our documentation, our wiki, our knowledge, our shared knowledge between the team, projects, tasks, a lot of that exists in Notion. So it's a really great product that offers this possibility to organize and get nerdy about data and ultimately extract more value out of the things that you do with that data using the tool.
We could go back. I mean, before Notion, you think about data, you think about information, and there's these real verticalized solutions, right? You need to do numbers, you use Excel, you need to do writing, you use Word or whatever else. Imagery, pictures, there's always sort of been a handful of things. Maybe you collect pictures in like a Google Photos or whatever. I think what's amazing is, for those of you that have not used it, Notion is like any kind of information, any kind of data, any kind of process. You can pull it in, organize it, use it, track it, manipulate it. It's like this infinite canvas for information to be leveraged, right? I mean, maybe I'm explaining it correctly, but that's kind of the like minimum biggest explanation for what it is, which isn't it super helpful? We'll get into how you use it later, but how would you better define it than that?
Some people refer to Notion as a language, not just a tool. It's a way of doing things, right? And I think one other verb that I would really add into the organize, the leverage, the manage is contextualize. Where does this data live in as part of your life, whether it's your professional or personal life? And the fact that it can exist in this one workspace. Like I draw an analogy right now, the way most of the people in the world working between disparate and siloed, let's call it Microsoft Office tools like Word and Excel. If you're in a physical office, imagine like having to do your work between two different rooms. You have to stand up, walk to another room, do the thing. Okay, go back to the room, do the thing. And they're fundamentally different places. Notion reimagines that. And it says, what if it's all in one place?
I have a coffee machine right by my desk because I don't want to walk downstairs.
So this is a digital application of this, like things got to be in one place to actually, enable you to work with that data on a day-to-day effectively.
So I want to rewind. Let's go back to 12-year-old Tim. You have a whole business. I love the name, Optemization, a little play on the words there, where you're doing consulting on Notion. You're helping top tier organizations like Discord and these companies like create better ways of working together with the tool. But what was 12-year-old Tim doing? Was he like a maniac with a label machine and organizing his shoes, like getting really crazy about it in his own way? Or was this something that evolved over time as a passion?
It definitely evolved over time as an interest, and it was driven by a few things. Because I wasn't the kid that was like labeling everything, highlighting everything, binders in folders and all that. I was not. And in fact, I'm still paradoxically disorganized in some areas of my life, and I'm perfectly fine with it. I don't find the need to organize and OCD sort of everything. But the way I've come across the tools, and by the way, 12-year-old Tim, he was very into the tinkerism, looking at something and kind of picking it apart. And like my grandpa and I used to pick apart TVs and stuff, or like play around with these like mechanical tools and all of that, and saw and build stuff and all that. So it's definitely not unique. That's part of a lot of boyhood. But then eventually, as I joined high school and college, I sort of had this desire around leadership, around being a leader, around organizing people. And my perception of what is a high quality leader does is one that organizes resources for people, makes them available, makes them accessible, and makes them enjoyable, and makes them higher leverage. And to me, that lens was through organization, through tools. And that's how I discovered Trello and Airtable and Asana and Slack and Zapier and Typeform, Paperform, and eventually Notion, and really leaned into, oh, Notion is this vehicle of me expressing my leadership, but also my worldview in a way.
I have to just acknowledge when I was a kid, one of my most favorite things to do is to get old electronics and take them apart. So I was like right there with you and grandpa, like figuring these things out. But I'll tell you what, and it makes sense for where you're at today. And I think probably many entrepreneurs listening probably had some sort of, we were understanding. We were like trying to understand and be curious and figure out what's beneath and why does this happen? And to me, that is like you're saying, like part of leadership and great leaders, they're able to break it down and look at it from a unique perspective. So I love that sharing that story. One, it's like what I did too, but also I do think it absolutely influenced this trajectory that you went on to now do it in digital and with systems and people and information, which is so rad to think about. So you mentioned a lot of tools. So, you back in the day, you were an NYU student, you were doing systems and organization and Zapier and all this stuff. And then think tools started to get better and tools started to get better. Tell me about the day you first came across Notion. Is it like, do you remember that day, who it was, what you were wearing?
I remember what I was wearing, but a few things I do remember. At that time, so I started NYU in 2015, and I went on a journey to build my first startup, first company. Spoiler alert, that did not work out, but that was that vehicle that introduced me to two things. Number one is this idea and this predisposition to tools and management by tools and the idea of productivity and efficiency and all that. That's when I remember discovering as a freshman Trello, Google Sheets, so on. That was number one. And then number two, it introduced me to the startup community at NYU and New York City broadly. And I took on a leadership role in one of the clubs. And eventually I had a lot of things to organize. Specifically, that was the events that we're hosting, the attendees that we're attracting for these events, the mentors and speakers that we're inviting to these events, and then the startups that we're helping launch through our programming. And all of that, in my mind, fit neatly into databases. And then I discovered Airtable to organize all that data, and that my tinkerism woke up with that. And I was like, oh, super cool to design this that way and make it useful, make it valuable, and so on with these tools. But also I have a bit of a hospitality kind of host mindset. And so when I would invite speakers, I want them to have a good time. So I'd prepare the tech in a way that, oh, they just have to click a button, oh, and they're checked in, or they get a brief about the startup in one click. I do all these things where I'm like, on one hand, it's efficient and productive, but on the other hand, it's aesthetically pleasing and efficient, the third party to receive and interact with, right? So I cared about, broadly speaking, user experience. And that's where I think design thinking kind of became one of the core strategic elements of our business now.
So there you were using the relics of the past, Airtable, Google Sheets, all that kind of stuff. And then one day,
Product hunt. I went to Product Hunt and I saw Notion and I was like, wow, this got a couple thousand upvotes. Looks cool. Let me try it out. And boom, I became a user. I went through this 3-day agony where I was like, I'm staring at this blank canvas, this blank page. And I'm like, I know I want to use this. I don't know how, I don't know what, but let me figure it out. And then I did. And actually, funny enough, I had side to side. I had Coda and I had Notion. And I knew I wanted to pick one. And I then eventually went with Notion because I think at the time, better design product.
I remember the early days of Product Hunt, and I had to get off the website. Like I had to stop going to Product Hunt because, for those of you guys don't know, Product Hunt was like a cool place to launch and share and find new products and software and sometimes services. And actually, we did a launch on Product Hunt for Design Pickle, got some traction. But man, it was so distracting. Every day you'd find the coolest things. But turns out one of these Notion, they did that. And what was the first thing you created on Notion? Do you remember? Like the first real thing, right? Like that you're like, man, I'm onto something.
Part of that startup club, we were running a mini accelerator slash competition program. And so I organized all of our startups there and like resources that I would share with them. So it's, oh, check out this deck, check out this article. Here is like the FAQ on how the competition goes. And then we would track their decks and their assets. So that was like the first like startup tracker, a very simple way to sort of a simplified CRM.
I think that kind of leads us to the founding of Optimization in 2020. So you launched this company, if I'm right, with COVID, let's launch this thing. Was it as COVID was shutting everything down? Was it right after? Because kind of a weird time to launch a business.
Yes. And I want to say, I draw a comparison between business number one, business number two, because when I started my first company, it was like fitness technology that I am passionate about fitness, but it was very much identify a problem, design a solution, create the deck, try to fundraise, because it was like very these classic motions of entrepreneurship, so to say, not even classic, education based, so to say. That's how you start business in college. But then with this business, with optimization, it was very much not that. It was very organic. So quick recap is that 2018, I found Notion as a product. Shortly thereafter, I joined Notion community run by someone else. It's called Notion Made Simple. I made sort of myself I was active on that community. Then Ben Lang, who used to be head of community at Notion, joined Notion because he had launched a Notion product. And so then he organized an event in New York where he invited me to do a little presentation about bullet journaling in Notion. I had no idea about bullet journaling, but I was like, I'll do it. I'll figure it out. So I did that presentation. That led me to become a Notion ambassador, a representative of a brand to like host events and continue sort of helping users around the world and so on. And then on the third event as an ambassador, this guy named Ian White approaches me. He's a founder. He says, we're using Confluence. We want to use Notion. We don't know how. Let me pay you to do this. And I was like, let's go. That sounds amazing. And so just emerged like my first customer just literally approached me. But then I wanted to work at Notion. And at the time, they didn't quite support H-1Bs. So I was like, okay, looks like my only other option immigration wise is self-employment. So go to Stripe Atlas, do the thing, get the visa, start the business. And I started optimization.com because it was available, because that was my social media username. So I am optimization at the beginning. But then I realized, oh, this is picking up pretty fast. I think there is an opportunity to build a team. And now we're like 12, 13 people around the world.
And so what a wild ride though, too, because, obviously you were doing it. There's great product being launched, community being formed. But then like 2020 and 2021 were just a crazy time for businesses. Like companies, some companies, like we were always an online business. So for us, it was really great when people couldn't work with people in person and needed to find virtual help, because that's what Design Pickle is, graphic designers on demand. But you are like, I think, in a unique space where people are having to change the way they're working. They're having to change the way they're thinking. So was that time helpful? Was like the COVID era helpful to be launching this? Or was it actually really hard because it was so chaotic and people didn't know what was going on? Like, talk to me about those early startup years. I mean, it's not too long ago, but definitely 4 years is a long time when you're running your own business.
Yeah, I think it definitely played a fantastic role in there, because our growth to the growth of Notion, like we just rode the wave all the way. I didn't quite have a seat at the rocket ship, but I sure damn hold on to the thrusters. And then I was like, take me with, because in businesses, there is this medium, like sometimes referred to as the water cooler conversation or the hallway conversation, or, like all these things that happen by osmosis or in between meetings. That was gone in a remote setting that doesn't exist. So that had to be replaced by an intentional approach to knowledge management, to capturing notes, to writing good documents, to instilling a culture of writing and reading. And Notion, it positioned itself to be that tool, to be a great tool for these types of activities. But because it is a fairly complicated tool and has so many bells and whistles and there's so many ways to design this workflow, somebody needed to help people to figure it out, and businesses. And I decided that we are going to be the company that will help businesses design their operations and management workflows using Notion because there's a clear gap there.
And so I want to double click and dive into kind of some examples because I have to admit, I'll be really honest. I've used Notion aside from years ago, right? And probably because of my own time management preservation, because I know when I find a cool tool, I kind of get lost and maybe I just need to be careful about that. But my brand mindset of Notion is pretty outdated. And I think for me, it's like bloggers, creative people, let's do a mood board, let's figure this out. But I know that's not the case anymore. I mean, I see people selling Notion systems and templates and stuff. It's like a real thing. So give us an example. What's like a recent project you've done to sort of level set the power of Notion today? Because bullet journaling is like, that's what I think about. And I know that's, yeah, you can do it, but there's way different stuff. So what's an example of a recent client project that you could share that's like, here's the real thing. Here's like some cool stuff that you can do with it.
Fundamentally, the use case that it covers, or like the bundle of actions and things that companies get done, is this is called knowledge management. So it's very broad, but it's like helping a company and its employees find a way to capture, organize, distill, and make effective the knowledge that is contained in their brains. So what does that translate to? That's translated generally to a documentation system that is not just a folder and folder type of Google Drive with a bunch of docs, right? Or similar things set up in OneDrive or Dropbox or whatever. No, it is like a space that is contextual to the work that a specific employee is doing. So that means a personal dashboard for the employee with the documents that are relevant to their job or to their project or to the current task at hand. Similar contextualization done on a team level, on a department level, on a managerial level, right? So it's not just capturing information, but it's making it useful in the most appropriate context. So for example, one of the recent workflows that we've implemented for a number of companies is creating this almost like internal newsletter, interactive sort of bulletin in Notion. So what they do is that they write a internal newsletter, or rather internal blog post, you can call it whatever you want, and then they publish it on Notion, and then it's immediately interactive, primarily through comments. But it's easy to work with as opposed to email or Slack. And the key there is what we call sort of like half-life of information. When it's a document, it doesn't fade away as fast as a Slack message does, or as a audio conversation or a video conversation. The information, it's more permanent, more persistent for consumption and kind of coming back to it, right? And now they're adding AI. And so now you can easily chat and just get all this information absorbed really quickly and delivered to you in the chat medium.
Actually, that's such a really simple example, but imagine the contextual and historical knowledge a new employee would have by getting to read the company newsletters and briefs and presentations. But where are they usually stored? Hidden away in drives and emails and Slacks. And now that I think about it, I'm like, crap, we probably need to do that too. We need to figure that out.
I'm coming up with an onboarding template that's really freaking good. So I'll send it your way once I have it.
So you mentioned AI, and we've had previous guests, we've talked about AI mainly from a creativity standpoint, because a lot of our guests are in the spaces of design creativity. How do you feel like AI is helping with the management of information? And I don't want to talk about the generation of information, because like we all know you can create content and write stuff and do images, but I'm wondering what you're seeing about how systems and businesses and things are like managing information better, if at all you think that's going to be impacting it, and what's ahead from your Notre Dame seat.
By the way, when I described 4 actions, I said when it comes to information, you have to capture, organize, distill, and I sort of said execute. That I owe reference to Tiago Forte. And he is the creator of a course and actually author of a book called Building a Second Brain. And he's very much like the champion of this idea of taking a lot of information that you store in your real brain and put it in a second brain, in a digital archive that you can reference, right? So he always says that when you come across relevant information that you want to work with, you need to capture, organize, distill, and his word is express, but I think in the business case, it's more like more make effective or make efficient or extract value from it. So the reason I bring these 4 verbs up is that usually these actions are done by humans. So capture, you read something in a book, you either copy it or you type it out yourself. organize. Okay, you decide this piece of text. Where does it belong? Does it belong with this tag? Maybe with that tag? Does it belong in this part of the workspace? Does it belong in that folder? Potentially, right? Distill is, okay, now that this is organized, what is valuable about this piece of text? How does this help me get my work done or get this task done or so on? And then lastly, execute, do something with it. So these four verbs, there are AI use cases or possibilities to streamline each action. So with capture, you eventually you may be able to connect, or even now you can connect Siri to Notion. So you could like, hey Siri, create a task in Notion for me to ping Russ tomorrow about the design Pickle launch, and then it will easily capture that. Right, that's a piece of task. Or for example, distillation. Distillation is already possible with Notion AI. You just ask, hey, summarize this document, or what is the connection between that document to this document? So now it does it for you. So it just speeds up all these things that we used to do manually with knowledge.
So what does that free us up to do that? What then are we doing? Making decisions better, faster?
Maybe just chilling on the beach. I don't
know. The real truth of AI comes out. I've done tons of guests, and finally we get to the honest answers here.
The truth at the moment is the tools are not good enough yet. There's the quality aspect that is quite missing, but it's slowly gaining there. And I think, the biggest thing that humans have an intangible advantage is taste. Is this feels good. This looks good. This allows for a special user experience. What I mentioned to you earlier about like hospitality and like creating this special experience for a person, it's probably at the time like hard for AI to account for that. Maybe not in the future, but for now. So I think now like humans kind of need to guide that and use it as a tool as opposed to a replacement for action.
Yeah, and I think if we're not busy doing all those things you mentioned, we can just connect better. Like we can be more present. I can't tell you how much more present I am during meetings with note-taking apps running in the background. Because usually when I'm taking notes, they're kind of bullshit anyway. I don't even know what I'm writing half the time. And I can just listen and I can connect and I can ask deeper questions, and I can think about things. So I hope we go to a more connected future state of all of these things now that the busy work is, being handled by the Skynet or whatever it is created. I think a guy like you and I, we could probably talk for a few hours and I could start going down the path of systems and hacks and automation and all of that. But I want to ask you one final question and then obviously here where people can connect with you is like, where do people get started? Because I think there's so much of that blank canvas effect when you think about building a new system, changing, organizing, solving those problems that exist around. But let's just talk about Notion, right? Episode sponsored by Notion. If you're thinking about a tool like that and you're thinking about the biggest bang for your buck just to get rolling, where would you say someone could first get started?
For me, it always starts of having a problem solved. I think just playing around and tinkering and all of that, there's a place for that, absolutely. But if you don't have a problem to solve, sometimes the motivation to change and to adjust the way you do things isn't there. So for me, I was like, I need to organize startups that I work with or these mentors or these people that I'm tracking. So what are some good tools out there to solve that? So I think Notion can help with that. But really, since I mentioned it's one of the best tools for knowledge management, I would think, what kind of knowledge do I want to share with someone? And I want to make it easy for them to be able to capture their thoughts, engage with my thoughts, and extract value from us exchanging knowledge on paper and very easily.
That's a very specifically broad answer. So I love it. We got to wrap up here, but Tim, I'd love to know where's the best place people can learn from you and learn about what you're doing, learn about your company, get your content. Where should people find you?
Mostly on Twitter at Temenco, Temnco. And I also am dabbling with YouTube. Haven't posted in a while, but trying to get back into it. So Twitter and a bit of YouTube.
Awesome. Tim, dude, I really appreciate the time today. Thanks for answering my random Twitter message. Twitter does work, everyone, to connect with folks. And by the way, if you want links to what we're doing, what Tim's doing, his agency, his work, his Twitter, go to jarofgenius.com. We'll have show notes, we'll have links, and you can find out more and get started on your Notion journey, perhaps. We'll be rooting for everybody and definitely want to hear how it goes if you do go down that path. But Tim, appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time today.
Thank you, Russ.
Take care. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Jar of Genius, sponsored by Design Pickle. To learn more about the topics discussed, get access to any of the links mentioned, and submit ideas for future seasons, head over to jarofgenius.com. Now, if you enjoyed the show, you know the drill. A solid rating on your favorite podcast platform helps others find what we are creating and join the conversation. We'll see you next time, and never forget, creativity is your secret strategic weapon.